Hey there, good afternoon, and welcome back to Women Leading People. My name's Evangelou, and I'm so excited to be bringing you this talking series designed to inspire and empower women as people managers. I'm so excited to welcome Neema Amin, who is a business strategy coach and has over 20 years strategic experience in the corporate world, and she's bringing that into supporting businesses now. So Neema, thank you so much for joining.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Eva.
Excellent. Well, it's wonderful to have you, and very keen to look at, both empowering and educating new managers into how they can get the best out of their roles, but also really keen to touch on your core theme, which was around women, collaborating more and how competition can sometimes be less than healthy. So I guess I'd love to start off with just hearing a little bit more from you on how you first got into management.
So my first step into management was totally by accident, actually. So I had started on sort of with a new company, newly formed team, and our roles weren't really scoped out. I was one of two women on the team, and the other woman was working on scoping out roles. And she actually lobbied for me to take on a lead role within the team. And she pushed really hard for this. And she came out of this meeting and told me, this is going to be your new role. And while I felt that I could do the role, I never actually asked. And I think it was almost a light bulb moment of thinking, you know what? She noticed that I wanted to do this. She obviously saw something. And I should have asked. I should have actually, really spearheaded that. So I was given the responsibilities of a manager, but I was never given the title. But what that did do was give me the confidence and the experience I needed. So when I moved on to my next role, and the same thing happened where I was given the responsibilities of a manager, but not given that exact title, I spoke up and asked for the title. I insisted that you put it into my contract. And it's silly because to me, a title doesn't mean anything, but to the outside world, it does mean something. And I think as a female leader, it does mean something to have that title, especially when you're starting out, because titles matter, unfortunately.
And do you feel that you got lucky in being given those first responsibilities without the role?
I think it was lucky. And I know a lot of people say it's all preparation. There's no such thing as luck. And some of it is preparation. I'd been on that team. Normally, when you're on a team with so few women, it goes one of two ways. Either you get along or you don't get along at all. And I happened to get along with this woman. We got on really well to the point where we did lunch every day. I could ask her, I don't know how to do this. Can you tell me, show me what to do? So it was building that relationship. And I think that was the preparation. Her noticing was luck.
Her noticing was luck. So How did you feel about that, just being given all of these responsibilities?
A mixture of excitement and pure fear. I was excited that somebody had noticed, because my philosophy has always been keep your head down, do the work, and someone will notice. And much later in my career, I've realized that's actually not the way at all. You don't get noticed. You're the doer, and that's how you'll stay if you don't speak up. Fearful that it was a team of leading a combination of men and more men from an offshore team. That terrified me. Not the fact that they were men, but they were older than me. They were a mixture of developers, analysts, and I felt I needed to know everything. And I wasn't going to be able to hold my own.
Yeah, and that's a massive fear for new managers, right? Particularly if you're going into a role where there are people who did the job before and might know more than you do about the company. So what was that like, just not having all the answers and all the information?
At that time, it was, as I said, just scary. I had no formal management training as such. So the way I learned was by observing other people. And my role models, so to speak, were other male managers. So I would try and emulate them. And the thing is, that doesn't work for a woman, especially an Asian woman. It just doesn't work. So I ended up taking on a lot of work myself, coming in super early to work, doing a lot of the hands-on, because I didn't want other managers to think that, you know what, you're failing at this because your projects are falling behind. And the truth was, I was under-resourced. Everyone else was falling behind. And I think I just didn't want to be that way. I felt I had something to prove. And I probably didn't really. I just needed to do the job and learn along the way.
And how did you come to that realization? Like, when did that bubble eventually burst of I have to do everything and know everything?
When people feedback, and this doesn't happen very often, I think it doesn't happen often enough. You know, when you say a few kind words to somebody, like, that's a great job you're doing, or I really like the fact that you didn't make this political, or you did this really well, you managed this. It's those few little words that make a difference. And the head of the department, after a project, came and said, really impressed with the work you're doing, well done. And that made me realize, okay, I'm on the right path. It didn't solve my problem. I think it was just pure exhaustion that led me to the fact that I've got to stop doing all the work and I need to figure out something else. And that was just trial and error, and learning the dynamics of a team, learning that the team is more about chemistry and psychology as opposed to just a skill set. And that was probably the biggest realization, by just observing people.
And you mentioned that you started off maybe emulating some of the male managers and what they were doing. And then, that doesn't work for Asian women. You said, okay, so how did you then change your management style? What do you feel is the Asian woman's guide to management?
Ironically, there was another Asian woman there that was super, super senior, and she did emulate the men, and it worked for her. The style just didn't work for me. I'm not a naturally shouty person in the office. I find that quite embarrassing for myself. I know most managers don't have the time, when you have a largish team, to really dive into people and understand, okay, what is it that's not working for you? You just need to do this. And what I did was actually take the time to start having conversations. Even the water cooler conversations, of, so what's going on? What is not, why are you not doing what I'm asking you to do? And that was a big thing, when you ask somebody on your team, can you get this done by 5 o'clock? And you see them walking out the door at 5 o'clock, and it's like, well, what do I say now? And the way I got around that was having those conversations of, okay, tell me what's going on? What part of this job are you not enjoying? What can I do to help you with this? Because there are going to be some crappy parts of the job that none of us like, but I can help you with some nicer parts as well, but we need to get through this. So it was really building those relationships in the team.
So sometimes you've just got to do the admin. No one likes doing it, but it's just got to be done. So how did you, I mean, if you're happy to share, do you have any examples of how people responded to that? Being asked, why are you not doing that thing I asked you to do? How do people react to that?
It was a slow thing. So surprising, there was a woman, and I always remember this woman. She'd been to this particular company. There was a lot of animosity between permanent staff and contractors. The two did not mingle very well. And this particular employee was a permanent employee. I knew that she had very good relationships within the organization with senior managers. So I couldn't really be very forceful. I needed to be careful how I phrased things and what I asked her to do. And what I always notice is that she came in super early. She would have a nice long lunch. And then she might do a bit of work. And then she'd be out the door at 5 o'clock. And in between, I'd have to get her to do specific things. And if she didn't like doing it, she just didn't do it. So I took her to coffee and started sort of not asking her, why are you not doing the work, but asking her, what's going on in your life? What's going on? Tell me about your career path so far. Where do you want to get to? What should you be doing in this role that will get you to that next point? And what I actually found was she was this, certified project manager. She'd done a number of analyst courses, and she was always passed up for promotion. And her animosity was the fact that they'd brought in an offshore team, and she was fearful that she was going to lose a job, or someone from that team was going to be promoted, or the fact that I was put into this role as an outsider instead of her. So I started working with her, giving her a few more responsibilities. And surprisingly, she took well to that, but other people in the business didn't take so well to that. They would come back and ask me, look, we can't work with her because she's not reliable, or I don't think she knows how to do it. And that's where I needed to start putting my foot down and actually supporting other people in my team, specifically this woman that, I think she can do this. You're going to have to give her a chance because I'm not going to come and do this. So you've got her or you've got no one. And she really came through. And it takes a lot of time because it was the largest team. I couldn't do it with everyone, but I did pick out the key people that I could see that either they were having problems or causing me problems on the team where the work wasn't getting done, and having those deeper conversations.
And I think it's amazing how you managed to get to the root of that problem, because if you'd have just taken it at face value, well, when I ask her to do things, she doesn't do them, or certain things, you could also have that perception, right, that she is unreliable. But you actually got to understand, why she wasn't doing certain things, and then definitely built that trust, and you were able to build that trust with the rest of the business. And what I found really interesting is the questions that you were asking. This is something I've been thinking more and more about recently. Sometimes when you ask people why, it's a very judgmental question, and people don't always respond really well necessarily. So I just noticed in the questions that you were asking her, you were saying, what is it about the job that you don't like? Tell me more. And I think those what questions and tell me questions just seem to resonate a lot more with people.
I think it's just those open-ended. People like talking about themselves, and and they like to, if you come out and just say, "What's the problem?" That's really aggressive. You're not going to get anywhere with that. But if you ask an open-ended question of, tell me what I can do to help you, I think it's just coming from a different place. And nothing is ever what it seems on the surface. Admittedly, I had her down as a lazy person, but she was super qualified. She knew how to do the role I was in, and given a chance, she probably would have kicked butt at it.
And it wasn't until you reached out with an olive branch, let's say, because she was disappointed that maybe you were given that role as an outsider. You said, so I really want to dig into this. So what is it with women and competition at work?
I think the corporate environment makes you that way. I think this, especially in industries like technology, in finance, there's so few of us. And instead of coming together where you are stronger in numbers, we decide that, well, we need to compete for that one spot. And there isn't one spot. There are many ways to get to where you want. We don't even ask, are you looking for the same thing? We just assume that we're competition because there's so few of us. I think in more recent years, with so many different communities, especially female-focused communities, it's getting better. But I'm not convinced we're quite there. I think, men are really good at, supporting each other in terms of, how do you phrase this? Quid pro quo. We don't do that as women. We don't tap each other on the shoulder and say, look, let me help you out. It's just not something we've done before. And I don't know why we don't do it more.
And they also seem to compete better as well, don't they? So they'll actually say, they'll be like, yeah, we're both going for that, and we're going to fight it out and be really open about it. If we are both going towards it, and, may the best man win kind of attitude. Whereas why do you think that isn't adopted in the same way? Why do you think that happens in these kind of industries or corporate environments?
I think there just are more opportunities for the cliche white man, middle-aged white man. if you look at most organizations, as much as they talk about being diverse and inclusive, a number of startups recently that I've looked at, I look at their employees. There is maybe a token woman if you're lucky. There is no ethnicity there at all. So you talk about being D&I, but are you actually practicing it? I'm not convinced everyone takes action and does it. It's easy to talk about it and talk about your feelings on it, what should be right, what should be wrong. And I think it's also just men being men. I think men are really good at brushing things off and getting on with it. As women, we're not good at that. We don't like to compete generally. We do then compete and then we hold it against each other instead of saying, okay, you know what? I'm here. I am going to really push that door open for you now. That's what I feel we should be doing and letting more women through.
Definitely. And I guess we can definitely get into this as well, but as to what you might think businesses should be doing, because it is easy to talk about, it is harder to do in practice. So I guess what the steps that businesses can take towards diversity and inclusion should be. But I think one of the main things that is common among our stories is, we both had a woman say, hey, I think you could do this, and kind of give us that responsibility. And I wouldn't necessarily have put myself forward for a role if, because I was really new and I didn't have that experience yet, unless another woman had said, hey, you can do this. And in particular, what we found, and this is even worse with diverse groups, it's that women are progressing in organizations. So once they get into their first management role, they then progress to VP and the C-suite. But it's getting that first step into the management, onto the ladder in a way that's failing. And I think a lot of that is, women also putting themselves forward. So how do you think we should do this at work?
I don't think there's a perfect answer in that. I think that a lot of it is lack of confidence, because as women, we're perfectionists. And I know I felt that I needed to know 90% of the job. And in truth, I didn't, because if you knew most of the job, why would you be applying for that job? That doesn't make sense. That makes sense to me now. Why would I, apply for a job that I can already do? I think I do feel that having female communities, or not even female communities, you can always have men helping women too. I think that there is something there too. But I think that specific female-founded communities help in the fact that it's outside of the organization. There's a level of trust there that I'm not speaking to somebody in the company that's going to feedback something negative about me, but I'm going to potentially get mentored by somebody that's going to help me with the skill set I need to really put myself forward. But a lot of that it's really about confidence. It's not about knowing how to do the job. It's a little bit of that hustle of, you know what, I know the core elements and I will learn the rest on the way. As long as you're not saying that you know how to fly a plane or something, if you don't know how to use a particular application, you know what, you'll Google it and you'll learn. That's fine.
Yeah, like faking the confidence, not necessarily the skills. And there's also an element of the fact of how you're perceived, right? Because if men are aggressive, or let's say assertive in the way that they say something, people will be like, yeah, that's a strong leader. Whereas, a woman says something and they'll be like, wow, this person is really catty or really bitchy. So in some ways, is it just also on women to just kind of keep going despite that, and just kind of ignore those comments and get on with it and ultimately prove that we can do the job? Or, should women also change the way we look at other women?
I think you have to be thick-skinned. And it's funny you say that, because in one organization, a small group of men actually went and told my manager, she's a total bitch. And it was totally because I was telling them to do something because it needed to be done. This is part of your job. And I'm not going to palm it off on somebody else because you don't want to do it. This is part of your job. And if a man had told them to do this, I'm pretty sure that they would have just got on it and done it. And I think it is just about being thick-skinned and letting it just go over your head. If that's how you think I am, I'm going to have to live with it, but I'm obviously doing something right if I'm getting that result at the end. But I think it can play on you after a while if that's the feedback that you hear.
So how did that situation resolve itself? Like, you tell someone to do something, they go off and tell someone else that you're a bitch. Like, first of all, that would crush me. Like, I think it would play on my mind, and I probably would think, because we tend to be self-aware and quite critical of ourselves. So you would, well, am I being a bitch? But you're doing the job.
I probably was a little bit of a bitch. In that, again, I was emulating what I saw around me. This is how male managers portion out work, and this is how they communicate. So I'm going to communicate in the same way, but I guess you don't expect it from a woman. And they didn't just go to my boss, they went to my boss's boss. Surprisingly, he actually stood up for me and said, you know what, she's doing a great job, you need to go back and do whatever you need to do. I'm not taking this any further. And I think that was because of the results that I was bringing out, because at the end of the day, all the company really looks at is that end result. They're not looking at that journey along the way. They don't have time. They have, a dozen other programs to look at. They don't have time to get into the detail of personal relationships and the day-to-day running of that operation.
And you said, surprisingly, he stood up for you?
I know. I did not expect that, because, when a group of men go and say something like that, you just expect that the other man is going to say, yeah, you know what, you're right. That woman, she just should not be in that position. And again, I think it was just that lack of confidence that I'm learning as I'm going along. I don't know if what I'm doing is right, but it's trial and error. This works, I'm going to carry on. This didn't work, I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to experiment. I'm not going to be 100% right in the beginning. You get better, obviously, the more roles that you do in that space, but I don't think there's ever a single way of doing something, because the dynamics are always different.
Mm-hmm. So what are the things you think that female managers need to do differently?
That's a tough one, because I don't think as female managers you should promote another female just because she is a female. I do believe it's the best person for the job. I do believe that. But having said that, I think, yes, it's difficult to get into that first managerial role. And then I think as you progress and you take a break to have a family, or whatever you do, you decide to take a sabbatical, it's difficult to get back into it and then move up again. And I think that's another space where you get stuck from that sort of director level to that C-suite. It's a tough move. I think it helps women collaborating more, as I've said, and that can be on things outside of the office space, projects that you're doing, making introductions to not just other women, but other individuals that would help their learning and their education. Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, because it's that balance of, I'm not just pushing you forward because you're a woman, I'm doing it because I believe in you. I think it really is just women stopping and not thinking this is competition, and how can we work together to take us both to the next level. So I think there's just as much to learn by being the mentor as there is the mentee.
Yeah, I think there's really something to what you said there, just that I believe in you thing, which I think women just don't have as much or need more of. And maybe that's just the way that we're brought up. But, most guys I manage will come in and say, how am I going to earn more money? And the women come in and say, how am I going to do better? And these are all the things that I need to improve. And maybe it's just that it's maybe more encouragement that women need to hear, because they won't necessarily push themselves forward. So yeah, still the best person for the job, but it's kind of identifying when someone is holding themselves back from it.
A lot of mindset work, I think, because you're absolutely right. We talk about how can I be better at this? And it's that constant look for perfection. And I see it in my daughter that, she's striving for that perfect before she'll put herself out somewhere. And it's teaching that, you know what? Money loves speed. That is a fact. You don't need to be perfect. And I remember the first video training series I did. I wish it could just be deleted from the internet because it's so embarrassing. It's cringeworthy. But it was putting something out there, trying something and seeing if it worked.
What's it on, Neema? I definitely need to post this in the comments and just, perfect is better than, done is better than perfect.
Yeah, perfect is overrated. Money loves speed. I can't remember who said that, money loves speed, but I think it is that. It's the case of put yourself out there, do it, learn from it, pick yourself up, try again. And that, I think, is mindset and learning to grow a thick skin.
And you said, just because you mentioned your daughter, so is your daughter putting herself forward for work positions right now?
Oh my goodness, my daughter's 8 years old. So she just turned 9. She just turned 9.
So what is she perfecting before she puts out there, like her artwork? Or
no, so my daughter has ambitions to be the president of the United States. So wonderful. No small ambition. No. But we told her that as she's not American born, she cannot become the president. Oh. So now she started a little YouTube video series where she talks about her ambitions. She talks, she's very politically minded, so she talks a lot about Black Lives Matter. She talks about challenges that you have as a girl. And a lot of what she does, to begin with, she would try and perfect this video. So I got her this little app where she can edit her video. And I'm like, you know what? It doesn't need to be perfect, but she would work at it until it was perfect. And she's now got to a stage where she'll put it out there. She screws up when she's saying something. She doesn't really mind. She puts it out there. So it's getting her to, in a safe space, being able to say what she thinks and get feedback. And at this age, it's the kids' YouTube. So it's not, I can monitor it. I'm not hopefully going to see any mean comments, but experimenting and really putting herself forward and not waiting to be perfect, because that's going to help her later on. If she always strives for perfect, then you're going to get left behind, I think.
And okay, so at 8 years old, the challenges she has as a girl, I want to know what those are. What does she say?
Some are really super petty. My presentation, if I don't look the right way when I turn up for school, I'm not going to get picked to be the eco warrior or the head of class or whatever it is. I have to say her school is super inclusive in terms of the way, so she goes to a girls' school and they're all about this female power, but they do it in such a way that's very nurturing. So the competition that I see within her year group, it's actually healthy competition. It's not what we see in the workplace. And, I've said before, so if you could bottle this culture that you have, this ethos, it would absolutely make millions. I don't know how you do it. And I see it all the way through their school that, yes, there is competition, but they're not mean about it. It is a case of, okay, you're the top of the class. I need to see how can I better myself? And actually asking each other, can you teach me this? Or can we practice together? It's those things. And I think we don't do that in the workplace. But if they can do that now, that's going to put them in a better place when they do enter that workplace.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine, and she's recently just joined a company, and one of the women who's been there a lot longer than her had done this presentation and automated a few things, and she was saying, I wasn't sure whether I should encourage her because then that might make me look like I don't know what I'm doing, or whether I should, just say nothing. But it's kind of like you said, it's that ethos of saying, someone's done something well, I could learn from this. I could like get something out of this, and it doesn't make me look worse. But isn't it interesting that even age 8, some of the thinking is, the way I put myself forward, I'm going to be judged for this. And sometimes that stops me from kind of putting myself forward because I'm going to be judged. But Yeah, I mean, really keen to hear more about this ethos. If you've pinned down like how the competition is healthier, like how they do it better, maybe we have a lot to learn from.
They celebrate a lot of the small wins, and it can be a tiny little win of, I'm trying to think of something. I ran 5K. I came last, but you know what? I did my personal best because I only managed 3K last time. And actually standing in front of, half the school and presenting. So they're very big on presenting, getting the girls to stand up in front of everyone. And I used to find this daunting. I used to hate speaking in front of people. But they get them to do that quite early on. So I think that's about building confidence. And you can celebrate that big win, which we see in the workplace of, I made MD. But the fact that you made VP is still quite a big thing. So it's that big win, little win, doing your best. And that's what's celebrated. Yeah, I can't quite pin down the threads of that ethos. If I could, I would definitely try and emulate it everywhere else.
Get it to every business, basically. So you also touched upon earlier, going back to work and what the struggle is like. So did you take some time out when you had your daughter?
I took a year out when I had my daughter, and I remember the first role that I went back to do was with a whole brand new client. And one of the reasons I picked this client was it wasn't financial services because I felt I needed a change. I'd never had a year off work. So it was quite new to me that, oh my goodness, a whole year. And this company was much closer to home. So it took away that hour's commute.
Which isn't a thing anymore.
Well, it's not a thing. Yeah, no. Yeah. But back then I remember it's like, oh my goodness, I got to get on that train, that running for the train. Oh, so I remember at the interview, the hiring manager lowballed me on my fee, and I went back to negotiate and said, you know what? Well, you've been off for a year being a mom, so you're probably not in that space anymore. You've missed out on a year. I was like, hang on, I haven't. I've kept up to date with everything that's going on in the industry. Really, not enough has been happening in that year that I've forgotten how to do my job. And he was convinced that that year off had lowered my intelligence in some way, and he would not shift on that. And to me, how many other women are in that position where they're trying to go back into work, negotiate flexible hours, or trying to get back into even their old job and being able to do that on a part-time basis. And I know that's difficult for a company. Some roles are not great for a part-time position, but giving women that bandwidth to learn how to be a mom and be a career woman at the same time, that's another learning curve for most women, I think. There's no handbook in telling you how to do that.
No, definitely not. And I think we have to stand our ground as well. So I'm not a mum, so I can't speak from experience, but I have an example of one of my old colleagues. His wife just went back to work after having children. She'd been out for a few years, as far as I know, but worked kind of part-time, freelance. So she was going back to a full-time role and again got lowballed for an offer. So her husband went back with a counter offer and said, this is what you're going to ask for. So they agreed together, and he said, no, you're going to ask for like 10K more or 20K more. I can't remember, but like a significant amount more than what she'd been offered. And she was terrified, she just kind of said, what, if you ruin this for me by making the suggestion, this is on you. And they totally accepted it. So I think sometimes there is that perception that, women also put it on themselves. Like, because if you hadn't been so strong-willed as to say, well, no, I have kept up to date and my intelligence hasn't been lowered in the last year, which is scary to do, right? Yeah. But if you hadn't said that and you thought, well, maybe I haven't kept up to date, or maybe I have missed out on something, then you would be lowballed again. And
absolutely.
I think this is up to women standing their ground as well, but also eventually changing employers' perception of this, because it means that you can manage a whole lot more.
Totally. And I think it's a whole untapped workforce that you're missing out on, the number of women that it's just not possible to have. Most of us need a 2-income family. But if you're both traveling for work or you're both commuting, that becomes near impossible. The number of women that I see at the imaginary school Glates that, they're talented women, they're highly qualified, but it just doesn't work that they can find a role that's going to be 3 days or 4 days and manageable. So I think you're missing out on talent.
Yeah. So how does that change now? We've moved over to remote working for the most part, or a lot of corporate jobs, a lot of jobs like this are more remote. And I don't know if I mentioned previously, but Neema is also known as the escape strategist. So can you tell me a little bit more about, what is the escape strategist? What does that mean? And how do you feel that remote working has changed the playing field?
So let me start with the remote working. I think the fact that we've campaigned for so long that, I can work from home and I'm not going to be doing the washing or the dishes and I'm going to be focused on work. Coronavirus has obviously forced us that way and shown employers that this obviously does work. I think it's almost like you need to have a negative to it, balance the positive, where I read about the fact that we have no work-life balance now because everyone's working extended hours. I think a balance is a myth. I think you find points in time that work. There is no such thing as balance. You find that little sweet spot. And that's what Escape Strategist for me was all about. I feel that I effectively missed out on the first 4 or 5 years of my daughter growing up because I wanted to be at work. That first experience really knocked me for 6. And I felt I had a lot of climbing to do, so to speak. And I needed to get back in the game. So I missed out on that first sort of 4 or 5 years, really. And nothing brings that back. Your children are young for such a short period of time. I knew I loved work. Not working was not an option for me because I think, as I said to you before, I have no other hobbies. I love what I do. So, I wanted to work, but I wanted to spend time with my family and I wanted to be financially secure. And for me, that is the escape strategy, having a combination of the 3 that works for you. There is no balance. It's about what works for you. So there are some years where working 5 days a week on super busy projects, that's perfect. That works for me. But there are years like this past year where balancing homeschooling, I can't take on a huge client because I know I won't be able to give them my focus. So you adjust. But it's those 3 threads that to me are the ultimate escape.
Yeah. So back onto how we get women to that level of being able to prove themselves, have more of the sweet spot that they can find and build that combination. Based on the challenges that you had, becoming a manager, what would your advice to new first-time managers be?
Give it a shot, because if nothing else, you'll learn something about yourself. There is no such thing as failure. There's a learning opportunity. And if something went wrong, you can bet your bottom dollar you're not going to make that same mistake again. You're going to remember what went wrong, and I'm not going to do that exact thing again. There are just learning opportunities. Failure is not, the be all and end all. It's a journey. It's a process. If you haven't failed or done badly at something, that success is never going to taste quite the same because you know nothing different from that. So I think it is really about shifting your mindset, and that takes time and practice. And it helps when you have other people around you that are going to support you through that. And that is through, as I've said, mentors, communities. Find people in the workplace that you feel you would want to learn from. And you'll be surprised if you go and ask, do you have 30 minutes for a coffee? I want to understand, how do I improve my education in this area? Or I'm here, I want to get to this level. So I remember, I think I was senior manager at a Big Four and I wanted to get to director. What do I need to do? Tell me the steps. If you don't tell somebody, they don't know that you're going for something. If it's all in your head, that's where it stays. You've got to talk about what you want, put it out there. There's no harm in putting it out there as long as you take action to move that forward. It's not going to happen on its own. No one's going to come and notice you and just promote you. very rarely. Maybe that does happen every now and then, but
yeah. But that's brilliant managers. I think the ones who recognize and just promote based on, not having to be pushed and just by recognizing performance, then that's ultimately what you want to get to. But it's difficult because there are a million and one different things that you have to do as a manager, right? So
exactly.
yeah. So how do you have a mentor now?
I do. I have two different mentors, not in the same industry as me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's helpful to have somebody to bounce thoughts off, somebody that's done what I want to do and can guide me to that point.
And I'd love to hear from you how you develop those relationships, because it's pretty unsuccessful in my eyes to just ask someone, oh, will you be my mentor? Because as you've said, the mentor learns as much as the mentee in a good relationship, right? So how did you go about building these relationships with your mentors?
So it's people that I knew within my network, and it was never a formal mentor-mentee relationship. It was always me asking questions, asking for help, which is something we are really bad at doing, asking for help and showing weakness. And it developed into that mentor-mentee where if I have a client that I'm not quite sure where to take next, I will pick up the phone and phone this one particular mentor, and he will talk me through different options of what what is going on, where are you struggling, you have this, tell me where you're stepping back, or just having a general chit chat about what's going on in life. It doesn't always have to be about work, and that's where that balance comes in. I know there are obviously organizations where you can go and pick out a mentor. That can work really well as well. But I think it's generally having conversations with people and finding that person along that way of, I think you can help me for this period, because once you get to that point, you might need to find somebody else. It's a very fluid set of relationships, but it is building that relationship first, asking questions. Most of the time, people are quite happy to answer questions.
Yeah, exactly. Like showing a bit of curiosity. People, yeah, like you said, really happy to give you their time. And then the other biggest chunk that you mentioned is like changing your mindset, which is, I mean, a whole other ball game. So what mindset did you have to change? What were the biggest things that you worked on, and how did you work on them?
For me, it was ensuring I wasn't always lowballed. The first job I had out of university, I was totally lowballed, and I accepted it. I was working on a huge program with lots of other graduates as well. And there's clearly a reason why they tell you not to discuss your salary, because you're all on different salaries. And I found a number of other graduates that were on a significant amount more than I was. And I questioned my manager about this. And his response was, yeah, we realize that. But if we now bump you up, then, you might not know how to manage that big jump. And at the time I accepted this. And
Manage that big jump? I had to jump in there. What does that mean? You're not going to know what to do with the extra £500 a month. It's just too much for you. Like what?
Clearly, no.
I'm angry.
I think when you're in your 20s, you accept this, because who are you to argue with the manager? And it took me a couple of months, and me talking to recruiters and looking at what was out there. I mean, everything wasn't so online back then, which is me showing my age. But having conversations with other organizations and recruiters, that made me realize, you know what, this is not right. I am worth more than this. And 8 weeks later, I left that company purely because of that. I loved what I did there. Right? The organization was lovely, but you left a bad taste in my mouth. That was not the right thing. I know there's lots of ways, formal ways to shift your mindset. I'm no good at any of those. I'm no good at meditating on things. I'm no good at mantras or manifesting. Anyone that knows me, I'm not open-minded about those things because I'm impatient. I never feel I have enough time to sit there and manifest something. So it is about taking action, analyzing that. It didn't go right. Okay, what didn't go right? Most things, you know, when you work on a piece of work, is analysis, it's research. It's the same when you take action. This went well. What went well? Because I can replicate that element. You can take a series of things that went well. What parts of those went well? Can I put those together and make something more successful? If something went wrong, what elements went wrong? Because you never forget what went wrong. You will play that back in your head and you won't make that mistake. So it's shifting those things that, okay, it went wrong. Pick yourself up, carry on. Let yourself wallow for a day or two if that's what you need, but pick yourself up and just carry on, because there's no stopping.
So what is your new mindset to not being lowballed ever again?
I turned down the piece of work. I have two non-negotiables, and that is flexible work and being lowballed. I'll negotiate with you, but if you're going to lowball me, then that's me done.
Yeah, I agree. We should be more final with this. And part of the problem is that people accept it, right? And it's like you said, you don't know that when it's your first job and you're in your 20s and, you know, there's no glass door, right? Now we can actually see.
And you're just grateful for a job. And I think that's at any point for women, especially when you're returning to work after a break. You're just so grateful that someone's going to give you a job that you just take it. And that's where that sort of financial security bit of the escape strategy comes in. If you are financially secure, if you have your finances, you know, pat down, you can say no to things, because you know that saying no just means something, you will work out something else.
Yeah. And I think also just being able to negotiate for that very first time, because for the most part, you know, some people who were equally lowballed as grads then said, no, that's not good enough and pay me more. And maybe they were given a slightly higher salary just for asking. I'm sure that's sometimes not the case, and negotiating won't get you everywhere. But, you know, if you're just grateful for a job, you probably will accept anything. I know I definitely accepted my first job with no negotiation and was perfectly happy with that. But obviously that changes, right? So, okay, so no meditating, no mantras, no manifesting, just go out and do it differently, reflect, remember what went wrong and go again.
Exactly.
Excellent strategy. Excellent strategy. So I guess, what does that look like later down the line? Like, did you find that the management challenges that you were facing in your first year of managing were the same 5 years later, or how did they change?
They changed because I changed, I think. I think I was less fearful. 5 years was probably not enough time. I think within that 5-year period, I'd got to the point where I'd realized that relationships and chemistry count for much more than just being able to do a job. If I look at over a span of 20 years, it's that confidence in yourself that I know I can do this and this. I'm not good at this, but I'm going to tell you I'm not good at that. So but I will compensate with this and this. And for me, it was really about dropping that title. I'm really not worried about what you call me, providing I'm paid well and I love what I'm doing and it's flexible. For me, those are the three things. I'm not too fussed about the status and the title, but that would be different for everyone.
Yeah, and that brings us really well full circle onto the Escape Strategist, and just talking about, tell us a bit more about what you're doing right now.
So right now I'm working with founders and entrepreneurs who have seen incredible success in their own careers, but now have decided to go out on their own and need help with their strategy and their implementation, because all of a sudden they are everything in their business and they're keen to get to that next level of success. So that's the main element of my business. I also collaborate with a number of other female founders. My main collaboration is through Collectively Driven, which is focused on providing business support for any female founder from any background in helping to start and scale an online business.
Wonderful. And where can people get in touch with you if they'd like to hear more?
So Yeah, escapestrategist.com and Collectively Driven on Facebook. Those are the two places that you can hit me up, and obviously on LinkedIn as well at Neema, Amin.
Wonderful. Well, Neema, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. And
me too. Thank you.
Of course, I'll post links to where people can reach you on these after, so people can find them. And yeah, I will see everyone next week at the next installment of Women Leading People. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye.